She was divorcing his son, so he allegedly killed her at a family wedding. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. Music, laughter, and champagne filled the Marriott Hotel in Schaumburg, Illinois. Christine Moyer, 45, had spent the evening surrounded by family, enjoying what should have been a rare moment of happiness amid a painful divorce. But as the reception wound down and the guests began filing out, a figure was waiting in the shadows of the parking lot. A single gunshot shattered the night. Screams erupted, and within seconds, a joyous family wedding had turned into a crime scene that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. When officers arrived, they found Christine lying near the hotel entrance, a gunshot wound to her head. Her killer didn't run. He didn't fight. He was subdued on the ground by a bystander, his hands pinned until police cuffed him. His name was Roland Schmidt. He was 76 years old, and he was Christine's father-in-law. What could drive a man, a grandfather, to execute his daughter-in-law in front of her family on one of the happiest nights of their lives? According to prosecutors, the motive was as cold and calculated as it was shocking. Roland Schmidt killed Christine over her decision to divorce his son. Christine Moyer wasn't just leaving a marriage. She was reclaiming her independence. Friends described her as strong, funny, and fiercely protective of her family. But to Roland Schmidt, her divorce was an insult. Police say that in his mind, Christine wasn't simply leaving his son, she was betraying his entire family. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Roland became obsessed. He followed Christine online. He called his son constantly, raging about the divorce. According to prosecutors, this wasn't anger in the heat of the moment. This was something darker, a slow, festering resentment that was quietly boiling over. He didn't just snap, one detective later told reporters. This was premeditated. He planned this for days, maybe longer. And the evidence proved it. Investigators discovered that Roland purchased ammunition the week of the wedding. They even found a crumpled note in his trash with just 7 chilling words written in shaky pen. "She won't hurt my son anymore." But perhaps the most disturbing detail was this: Roland attended the wedding. He smiled. He shook hands. He posed for photos. All the while, prosecutors say, he carried the gun he would later use to kill Christine. He looked calm, one guest later told police. Not angry, not upset, almost peaceful. If you didn't know what he was about to do, you'd never suspect a thing. That calmness, experts say, is exactly what made him so dangerous. Forensic psychologist Dr. Hannah Kepler explained it this way: this wasn't a crime of passion. This was control. Roland believed that by killing Christine, he was fixing what was broken. That's why he could sit through that wedding smiling. He had already made up his mind. At 10:15 p.m., as Christine stepped out of the hotel, Roland followed. Surveillance footage later showed him trailing her every step. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. And then, in front of her family, he raised the gun and fired. She never even saw it coming. One relative sobbed in court. Guests screamed. Some froze in shock. But one brave bystander tackled Roland to the ground before he could fire again. Police arrived within minutes, recovered the gun, and arrested Roland on the spot. Inside the interrogation room, Roland spoke with chilling calm. According to prosecutors, he admitted he had planned the killing for a week. He even told detectives he intended to kill himself afterward. When asked why he did it, his response was simple and cold. "I wanted her family to see." That single sentence sent a wave of horror through the courtroom. Roland hadn't just murdered Christine. He wanted her loved ones to witness it. To him, it wasn't enough to kill her, he wanted to make it an act of punishment. He executed her in the presence of her own family, prosecutor Ellen Mandel-Tort said in court. This was deliberate. He wanted them to suffer. Dr. Kepler, the forensic psychologist, described it as moral disengagement. When Roland looked in the mirror, he didn't see a killer, she explained. He saw someone doing what had to be done. And that's what makes him so dangerous, because he doesn't believe he's wrong. In the days after Christine Moyer's murder, the Schaumburg Police Department became a war room of unanswered questions. Detectives combed through Roland Schmidt's life, trying to piece together how a man who spent decades raising a family could transform into a killer. What they found was chilling. Roland's neighbors described him as quiet, polite, and the kind of man who always waved from his porch. But behind that polite nod was a mind spiraling into obsession. Divorce, according to prosecutors, was more than just paperwork to Roland. It was humiliation. Detective Brian Keller put it bluntly, this was about control. He wasn't just angry at Christine. He saw her as the person who ruined his son, embarrassed his family, and, most of all, defied him. Footage from the Marriott security cameras showed Roland hours before the murder, sitting alone in the hotel bar. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't talking. Christine danced with her family. She laughed. And every so often, Roland's gaze followed her like a predator waiting for the right moment. Prosecutor Ellen Mandel-Tort later told the court, he wasn't just angry. He was patient. He was waiting for the exact moment she was most vulnerable. At 10:15 p.m., Roland stood. He adjusted his suit jacket, walked out into the parking lot, and waited. When Christine emerged, surrounded by her relatives, he followed her. What happened next was already burned into the minds of every witness. One of Christine's cousins later testified. He looked at her like he'd been rehearsing this moment. And then, he just pulled the gun. To truly understand Roland Schmidt, the prosecution brought in Dr. Hannah Kepler, a forensic psychologist who had studied family-based homicides for more than 2 decades. Her analysis was damning. Roland Schmidt believed this was his last chance to reclaim power. He couldn't undo the divorce. He couldn't stop his son from losing his wife. But in his mind, he could erase the person who caused it. She explained a phenomenon called familial annihilation fantasy, a psychological state where an individual convinces themselves that they are the only one who can fix the family's shame. Roland didn't see himself as a killer, Dr. Kepler told the court. He saw himself as a restorer of order. And that's what makes him so dangerous. The trial was a grim affair. Christine's family packed the courtroom, many wearing shirts printed with her photograph. They spoke through tears about the laughter Christine brought to every room, about her kindness, about the life she should still be living. Roland never turned to look at them. He sat motionless, his expression empty, as if he'd walled himself off from their grief. One family member later told reporters, he didn't blink. Not once. It's like he wasn't even there. Prosecutors presented a devastating case. The gun, the note, the witnesses, the surveillance footage, and above it all, Roland's own words, his confession, his lack of remorse, his eerie composure. He planned this, Mandel-Tort told the judge. He waited for the wedding. He smiled in their photographs. He hid his gun until the very last moment. And then, in front of the people who loved Christine most, he pulled the trigger. The judge ordered Roland Schmidt held without bail. His trial is set for later this year. If convicted, he will almost certainly die in prison. But even that hasn't brought Christine's family comfort. He'll never think he did anything wrong, Christine's sister told the press. He'll go to his grave thinking he's the hero of his own story. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Roland Schmidt didn't look like a monster. He looked like somebody's grandfather. He sat at a wedding table, smiling through dessert, while carrying the weight of a plan that would destroy an entire family. This case is a grim reminder that the most terrifying killers don't always come in the form of strangers lurking in the dark. Sometimes they're sitting right next to you. Christine Moyer's life was stolen in an act of cold, calculated control, a killing that prosecutors say was less about rage and more about power. And as this case moves toward trial, one thing is certain, there are no winners. A family is shattered. A community is left in disbelief. And a 76-year-old man, once seen as nothing more than a quiet grandfather, will now be remembered for one thing: the night he turned a wedding into a funeral. Because in the end, true evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, it sits across the table, smiling while it waits for the music to stop. When Roland walked into court, shackled and silent, he didn't look at Christine's family. He didn't even look at his own son. But his son looked at him. And what he said in court silenced the room. "My dad destroyed 2 families that night," he said, his voice cracking. "He killed Christine. And he killed the father I thought I knew." Christine's sister sat just feet away, holding a framed picture of Christine smiling in the last photo she ever took. Prosecutors presented their case with devastating precision. The gun purchase. The note that read, "She won't hurt my son anymore." The internet searches. The surveillance footage of Roland trailing Christine before the shot. Every piece of evidence built the portrait of a man who didn't just act, but planned. And then came Roland's own words. Detective Keller read them aloud to the jury. "I wanted her to understand. I wanted her family to see. They'll never forget this." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The jury didn't deliberate long. Roland Schmidt was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, unmoved by Roland's age, sentenced him to life in prison without parole. But even as he was led away, Roland didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He simply stared ahead, as if convinced he had been right all along. Christine's family embraced one another, sobbing, but there was no sense of victory. "Justice doesn't bring her back," her sister whispered to reporters. "We just have to live with it." In Schaumburg, the hotel parking lot became an unspoken memorial. People left flowers by the entrance where Christine fell. Her friends said it wasn't just about grief, it was about reclaiming the space where her life was stolen. Meanwhile, experts continued to debate Roland's mind. Was he evil? Delusional? Or just a man who believed control was more important than humanity? Dr. Kepler offered one final haunting thought. Roland Schmidt wasn't insane. He was certain. And that's far more terrifying. Christine Moyer's murder is a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest danger isn't from strangers lurking in the dark, but from those who sit across from us at the dinner table, smiling politely, while quietly deciding our fate. And in the case of Roland Schmidt, a family wedding didn't just end in tragedy, it revealed the monster hiding in plain sight.